Certainly does, Tom. This is a new report out from the Centre for Independent Studies today titled Worlds Apart, and the title really gives you an idea of what is in that report. If we look at some of the issues that have been highlighted when it comes to life expectancy for women, it shows that the average life expectancy for women in urban areas, this is Indigenous women, is 76.5 years compared to just 69.6 years for those in remote communities. For men, that figure is 72.1 years in urban areas compared to 65.9 years in remote communities. Also, school attendance, the national school attendance level for Indigenous students is at 82%, but here in the Northern Territory, where many of those Indigenous children live in those remote communities, the level is at just 63%. There's also a glaring gap when it comes to unemployment. The unemployment rate for Indigenous people living in remote communities is at 19%. Non-Indigenous people living in similarly remote areas, well, their unemployment rate is at just 7%. Now, Jacinta Price, who works for the Centre for Indigenous Studies, is also the Deputy Mayor of Alice Springs. She's the author of this report. Here's a bit of what she had to say.
It's almost as if, it's out of sight and out of mind for a lot of Indigenous people in remote communities. There are higher instances of domestic and family violence in these communities. In fact, domestic violence across most states and territories in the Indigenous community is at the very least double the state and territory average.
This comes just a couple of weeks, Tom, in fact, after a woman was run over by her partner outside the Alice Springs Hospital, an issue that garnered plenty of attention in the local media, but not so much nationally. Her partner has since been charged with murder over that incident. Jacinta Price says that there needs to be more of a focus on what's going on in some of these communities, but she says that our focus tends to be drawn away to some other more superficial issues.
It's always these demands of acts of symbolism that seem to prioritise our country's leaders, that certainly prioritise our priorities for the activists in this country, and they suck the oxygen out of the need to focus on these far more important issues that affect marginalised Indigenous Australians.
Tom, this report raises some similar issues that were discussed in a submission that was put to the Productivity Commission by the Yothu Yindi Foundation, which runs the annual Garma Festival, more than 2 years ago. Now, in that submission, the Yothu Yindi Foundation pointed to the growing number of Indigenous people in New South Wales and Victoria compared to the Northern Territory. It's argued that funding for Indigenous people should be based on disadvantage rather than just indigeneity. That's something that Jacinta Price says she agrees with.